Spring 2008 on TSN is brought to you by the new Q horsepower from Quaker State. Unleash all your horses. And Michelin, a better way forward.
This week we're in beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia, a city with lots of history. And so it seems only fitting that this week we're going to check out one of the best-selling vehicles in the history of the Canadian automobile market. That car is the Honda Accord. It was first introduced in 1976. In fact, Honda made history by becoming the first Japanese company to manufacture a vehicle in this country, and that car was the Accord, and the year was 1986. Well, from about 01 to 05, the Accord was the best-selling mid-size vehicle in Canada until last year when the Camry took over #1 spot. Well, that did not sit well with the boys and girls at Honda, so the result, this week, we're going to check out the 8th generation Accord, a vehicle Honda is convinced will put them back on top.
This is the most competitive market in Canada. Everybody thinks with crossovers and SUVs, that's where people are going. 1 in 4 cars is a mid-size sedan.
Well, the Accord, of course, is one of our foundational products. It's been on the market since 1976. And it is the second largest volume vehicle that we sell in Canada next to the Civic. Traditionally has been the #1 car in the mid-size market, so certainly very important for us and very significant within the Canadian market. Of course, fuel economy is very important, and with the new Accord, we've been able to make it larger, more roomy inside. It is much more powerful, and yet we've been able to maintain the same fuel economy as the previous Accord. We have 2 engines. We have our 4-cylinder. Then we have our new V6 engine, 268 horsepower, with a new generation of variable cylinder management. And that's where the car can run on 3, or in this case now is a new innovation 4-cylinder. It optimizes the fuel economy, so it maintains the fuel economy that we currently get.
You know, rightly or wrongly, a lot of people believe that hybrids are the future of the automobile. But having said that, Honda, one of the most respected car makers in the world, has actually discontinued its hybrid version of the Accord.
It wasn't selling. It wasn't selling. The numbers that I heard is that in all of 2006, I think, the Accord hybrid sold something like 5,000 copies or something, whereas the Camry sold 10 times that. Numbers like that.
When we looked at the new Accord, we were looking at the market, and we've seen that fuel economy is the #1 reason that people want to buy a hybrid. With Honda, we also look at a variety of options. So in the future, we have a new diesel engine coming for North America that meets the strict Tier 2 Bin 5 emission standards. We have the new global hybrid coming in, and again in several years. So that's still future, but it shows that there are many, many different avenues to approach. The coupe is our sort of passion vehicle. It is, I think you'd agree, very stylish. Of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The high-end model is our 6-speed manual, sport-tuned suspension, 18-inch wheels. It's a delight to drive, and we think it's going to resonate in the market for people looking for a sporty mid-size coupe.
Honda Accord has been, I think, a car to be reckoned with for a long time. It serves as a reference in the category, and it continues to do so.
You know, it's really hard for me to find something I don't like with this new Accord. Sorry, you Toyota guys, but if I really had to think about it, now this one could be because of my old body, but I find the front seats a tad hard. And shame on you, Honda, for allowing me to rant about one of my favorite pet peeves. Here it is. No latch to open up the trunk.
I think the car will sell itself. And if you made a car for 8 generations, you know, it's a given that the car has basically proven itself, and I think that the Accord will do really, really well. The only competition it's really going to have is the Camry. It has a little more pizzazz than the Camry, I think it does, but I think the Accord will continue just to truck along. People will buy it and people will like it.
Should Toyota be nervous?
No, I don't think Toyota's nervous about anything.
We've tried the new version. It's the most stiff, the most stable, and the best driving Accord I've had yet. It's reliable, it's tough, they're great motorists. I mean, you see by the way they do engines, the way they can make a 6-cylinder not only affordable but economical too. They're doing a great job. And I think they have with this new Accord something that could, again, pick up the #1 spot.
The buck stops here. But where does the loony stop? More later on Kenzie's Corner. Wow, raised. Cool.
The original Highlander was very much a stereotypical SUV. One box up front for the engine, a bigger box for everything else. This week on Test Drive, the second generation Highlander. Yes, it's still a bit boxy, but it's got some clever thinking beneath those boxes. The new Highlander has a more planted stance than the previous model in spite of its 25mm hike in ride height. Now this is down to the substantial upsizing of all key dimensions. Riding on a derivative of the Camry Avalon platform, the 08 Highlander has a 75mm longer wheelbase, it's 96mm longer overall, and 75mm wider. Now this increases interior space dramatically without making it feel much larger from behind the wheel. One of the bigger improvements to this new Highlander is the interior. First of all, the materials are top notch and the fit and finish, well, it's unrivaled in the business. Then if you go with the sport model we're testing, you get everything. Leather seats, power everything, including a moonroof, and a very good audio system. There are, however, two things that are worthy of note. First of all, this little 3.5-inch screen, it actually shows you what's going on behind the car. Now, why is that significant? Purely and simply because you do not have to buy the navigation system to get the backup camera. The other thing, you've got massive knobs for the radio and climate control, then you get to the heated seats. Little tiny eeny-weeny buttons that you cannot operate with a gloved hand. They should be large enough that you can do that. Obviously, motivating the extra sheet metal mandates more power. The Highlander earns it in spades. Powered by an advanced 3.5-litre V6 that delivers an impressive 270 horsepower, which is up 55, and 248 pound-feet of torque at 4,700, which is again up 26 pound-feet. The Highlander is not left lacking. The initial launch is strong and this work ethic continues through the mid-range. A handheld stopwatch put the 0 to 100k time at 7.8 seconds and the 80 to 120 passing move at 6.9, which are both pretty quick for this segment. The middle row seats pick up where the front row leaves off. They're very comfortable and you've got decent head and leg room if the third row is in use. When it's not in use, you slide the seat back, now you've got your own personal limousine. There's also a neat party trick. This shelf comes out and in its place, you slip this thing in, now you've got a 3-row bench seat. The problem is, these two bolsters mean you've got to have an awful skinny bottom to sit in here. The reality, I don't think this feature will see very much use. The biggest disappointment is the lack of a 6-speed automatic. The Highlander makes do with 5 gears. The reason for the disappointment is that 2 of the Highlander's key competitors do employ 6 speeds, the Mazda CX-9 and Hyundai Veracruz. That said, the 5 gears do manage to keep the engine in its sweet spot and provide some semblance of fuel economy, a test average of 11.7 litres per 100 kilometres. When it comes to utility and versatility, the Highlander doesn't disappoint. With the third row up, you get about 10.6 cubic feet of cargo space. Fold them down, which is a simple operation. You open up 42 cubic feet, and if you fold down the middle row, it grows to 95 cubic feet, which is enough for most eventualities. There are, however, 2 interesting things. First of all, what do you do with the privacy cover if the third row's in use? In most cars, it means sticking it in the garage. In the case of the Highlander, it stores neatly under the floor. The second thing, what happens if the back glass is open and you inadvertently open the tailgate? Now, in many cases, the tailgate would crash into the glass and you'd end up doing some damage. On the Highlander, it simply locks the tailgate. No crash, no damage, no muss, no fuss. It's the type of clever thinking you'll find throughout the rest of the vehicle. When it comes to handling, the Highlander drives very well. The oversized 245/55 R19 tyres on the Sport model helping enormously. It is predictable, pointable, and body roll through the pylons was minimal, especially again in the Sport guise. Likewise, the standard all-wheel drive system brings the expected stability. The latter also means the Highlander does a very credible impersonation of a true off-roader. Remember, this is primarily a car-based crossover. It features anti-lock brakes, electronic stability and traction control systems, as well as the hill start and downhill assist systems needed when you're in an off-road situation. So there you have it, the second generation Highlander. Now there will be some that suggest Toyota should have pushed the stylistic envelope a little further. However, as in life, beauty is more than skin deep. Beneath this skin, you'll find a great engine, tons of utility, a very nice interior, and if you go with the Sport model, a vehicle that handles very well both on and off-road. The bottom line, this is still the high watermark in the crossover segment.
Time to wrap up our long-term Suzuki XL7. First off, this second generation XL7 is a huge improvement over its predecessor. It's larger, it's more powerful, and has added utility. The 3.6-liter V6 is more or less the same engine that General Motors uses for its up-level models like the Cadillac CTS and the Saturn Aura. The ride is comfortable, steering is precise, and the 5-speed automatic is seamless. Now our test model comes fully loaded. Navigation and satellite radio, leather seats, power everything, and all-wheel drive, although it also is available in front-wheel drive. Our test model also comes with a third-row seat, but of course when it's in use, forget the suitcase or the golf clubs. And if you don't need the third row, you can save yourself close to $1,500. You know, the XL7 is based on the Chevrolet Equinox and the Pontiac Torrent platform, but you know, I find this the better looking of the three. Inside fit and finish is okay, although you do find some of these switches must have come from the GM parts basket. And the placement of the window controls is a little odd, and although we've had this vehicle for over 6 months, when I go to put the windows up or down, I still find myself looking for them over here. But then again, I have a hard time finding the bathroom at night. Bottom line, if you're in the market, the XL7 deserves a hard look, and it can be a good deal as long as you select only the options you truly need.
Closed captioning of Motoring 2008 is brought to you in part by Chevrolet. Let's go. Visit letsgochevrolet.ca.
The highest tides on the planet occur right here in the Bay of Fundy along the western coastline of Nova Scotia. Tides here have been recorded at 16.3 meters high. We're talking 53 feet. The tidal action of the Bay of Fundy moves more water than all the world's rivers combined. You ready for this? About 100 billion tons twice a day. Now that may have nothing to do with cars, but it's awfully interesting. Speaking of cars, a lot of the journalists were raving about the Honda engines found in the new 2008 Honda Accord, but you know, over the years it's always been that way. It's hard to find somebody that will criticize a Honda powertrain. So what's their secret? Well, let's ask our man in the Quaker State garage, Bill Gardner.
Brad, I've always loved the way they can wring a lot of output out of a small displacement. That's been something they've really been good at, but you know, think about all the different pieces of machinery that have got a Honda engine powering them now. You know, you look in the back of a tire service truck, probably got a Honda engine driving that air compressor, pressure washers, generators, lawnmowers, outboards, you name it, they've got an engine for that purpose, and usually the best ones, so they're there. Anyhow, I want to talk this week about engine mounts, and in particular, this 99 GM J car. This one happens to be a Sunfire, but a Cavalier is very similar. There's a lot of these cars on the road, so you might want to pay attention because this might help you out with a problem you may run into if you own one of these cars. Now, this 99 doesn't have a lot of miles on it, I think about 130,000, and it's a small 4-cylinder engine, not a lot of power. You wouldn't think it would break an engine mount. Used to be the bigger V8s, rear-wheel drive cars would bust engine mounts, but this one was making a terrible clunking sound in the right front corner of the car. When I road tested the car, I thought it was the right front suspension because every time you went over a bump, you got the clunk. But it turns out that the engine mount, this is the old one right here, but it's located right here at this end of the engine, was loose. There's a couple of rivets that hold the mount together. Now it's the job of this engine mount to isolate the noise, vibration, and harshness produced by the engine from getting into the chassis of the car. And it does that via this chunk of rubber. There's also a viscous fluid in the base of this particular mount. This mount's $340, by the way. It's pretty expensive. You've got to get it from the dealer to get the right one. I tried to go the cheap route, bought an aftermarket one for $100, and it didn't fit worth a darn. It was downright junk, so I took it back, bit the bullet, and went to the dealer and got the right one. The car was fixed, noise was gone. All we had to do to produce the noise, by the way, with the engine off, was grab the engine and shake it around on the mounts, and I could produce the noise under here. But you know what? The funny thing was, driving the car, I would have sworn it was in the right front suspension. So it just goes to show you, you've got to road test it and check it out thoroughly, because things aren't always what they appear to be. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2008.
Today we're at the Dunnville Autodrome. We're here to launch the new Tiburon, the Accent SR, which is unique to Canada, and also our line of high-performance parts. We're trying to realign our brand image in the marketplace. A lot of Canadian consumers look at Hyundai as cheap and cheerful, and we want to change that image to represent a quality, value, safety, and styling. And we also want to connect with the youth market. And in order to do so, we've come up with some very special cars like the Tiburon, the unique Canadian Accent SR, and this line of high-performance parts to really connect with the tuner crowd. We're offering in our line of high-performance parts everything from mild to wild. So there's catback systems, axle back exhaust systems, suspension parts, good-looking wheels and tires, ground effects kits, and the ultimate superchargers and intercoolers too for the real hardcore enthusiast that really wants to go fast. The Accent SR is a unique to Canada initiative. We've taken the stock Accent and we picked 500 units, the sport model, and we're doing a little of our own factory tuning so that this car not only has the looks for the street, but also some additional performance and handling. You know, whenever I go to either Walmart or Toys R Us with my family, I seem to bolt directly to the diecast section, and it just bothers me that there's no Hyundai diecast there for the young kids and young kids like me to go after. So part of the rationale for tuning these cars and coming up with the performance parts is to have kids come out and want to collect diecasts of Hyundais. That's what it's all about.
And don't do any racing on the road.
Never race on the road. That's not smart. That's why we're here at the track.
Listening to the radio on the way in this morning, the Canadian dollar was down 0.2 cents against the U.S. greenback. Now, I don't know what the exact exchange rate is the moment that you're watching this show, but I do know compared to 3 or 4 years ago, wow, remember the days of the 66-cent dollar? Well, one advantage back in those days was that Canadian car prices were cheap. I remember when the Volkswagen new Beetle was introduced, it was $2,000 less money in Canada. And I don't know why I remember this particular number, but the Volvo S80 was 10 grand cheaper when you do the currency exchange conversion. Nowadays, no, that's a different story because the $2 are pretty much at par. So shouldn't Canadian car prices come down? Well, they have. A couple of high-end manufacturers have dropped their prices 8-10%, not nearly as much as the currency exchange difference, but it is a step in the right direction. So now that you can get Canadian cars in the States, even cars built in Canada are cheaper in the States than they are here. Does that make sense? Well, not really, but there are a couple of mitigating factors. First of all, it does cost more money to do business in Canada. Our population is spread out. We do have higher taxes, higher cost of living. That translates into higher cost of doing business. Now, you could go down to the States and buy the car. You could save yourself some money. You're going to end up with a car that's calibrated in miles instead of kilometers, if that makes a difference to you. There are a few standards that Canadian cars have to meet. They don't have to meet in the States, but you can still bring the car in because of NAFTA. Now, the car companies are going to tell you the warranty won't apply. The dealer might give you a hard time, and frankly, that's understandable. I mean, if you're in the widget business and your next door neighbor buys a widget made in Texas for 20% less than you can even make the thing for, then if something goes wrong, he brings it to you to get fixed. What are you going to do? How about those Blue Jays? You're not going to want the business because he didn't support you when you needed the business. Now, the Canadian car dealers, they're in that basic same situation. Now, the question you're probably asking yourself, what would I do? Well, in fact, I am in the market for a car, maybe not a new one, but certainly a late model used one. I have to admit, I've been looking on eBay, looking at cars in the States, and they are pretty cheap. But you know, maybe for a $500 camera, I'd take the chance. For a $20,000 car, I think it comes down to getting the car that's fit for the Canadian market, and frankly, I want to support my local gunfighter. I'm Jim Kenzie.
This week we've been checking out the 2008 Honda Accord, and here's a little trivia for you as to how they came up with the name Accord over 30 years ago. They tell us the name Accord was derived from Honda's effort to achieve accord between people, society, and the automobile through innovative technology. Well, there's plenty of that in the new Accord, and once again with this 8th generation, Honda has raised the benchmark. And of course, lots of choice with 2 4 and 2 V6s to choose from, and the 4-cylinder will be the big seller. It's more than capable, but do yourself a favor, get behind the wheel of the V6. As my nephew would say, it is so sweet. A lot of pressure on this Accord to recapture that #1 spot from Camry. Can it do it? Well, as usual, you, the consumer, will make the decision. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
These cars are very inexpensive for what you get, and I don't think it's fair to criticize vehicles like this for not having, you know, leather interiors or really plush items. The caliber starts, you know, in the mid-teens, and this car, $24,995 for 285 horsepower. I mean, it's really quite unprecedented.
Motoring 2008 on TSN has been brought to you by the new Q Horsepower from Quaker State. Unleash all your horses, and Michelin, a better way forward.